So I didn't film a behind the scenes of me actually trying to figure out how to make the Jack-O-Yarn. Just wanted to figure it out. It's just a lot of trial and erroring, but I did get it to work. The pink that I ended up using, was in a cake of yarn. It was kind of in the right shape. I was thinking I could just use it the way it was and just try and make little eyes, but I thought it was kind of small, and it ended up not working. So I decided to make a bigger version, and I like that because it's more pumpkin shaped, pumpkin sized, and I really wanted to be able to just have it be hollow and just like stuff a bunch of guts inside of it that I could then take out. The yarn is wrapped around a cardboard tube, wrapped around in such a way where there's a hole in the top and the bottom. So I basically did that. I made a giant cardboard tube. It has a hole in the top. It doesn't have it is solid along the bottom. There's still a little seed in there. Just a little string tree seed. And I used just a regular cardboard box. So laying it all flat, and then I tore the flaps off. And so it's one of the larger sections and one of the smaller sections. So it's like that much of the box. And I just kind of folded it along so that it would make a better circle. It's much more circular. So once it was taped down, proportionally it's a little tall to what I really wanted, so if you kind of fold the edges down, top and bottom, but generally if you pick a pumpkin, it's not a perfectly symmetrical, like flat on top tube. It's got imperfections and it's wrinkles and lumps, so the more rounded top kind of gave it some of that. I also thought it might make it a little stronger. I don't know if that's really true. It feels a little more sturdy that way. And then originally what I wanted to do was to have, I thought it would be cool if the light shone through the yarn itself, like the candlelight between, if you have a layer of yarn and then the candlelight shows out through the cracks. That could look cool. So I tried to do, I cut a rectangle in the flat surface, this part where the face was going to be, and I taped plastic over it. Like this here is not a hole, it's actually plastic that's underneath the face. But I think actually it would have been better to just leave it alone and just cut out the eye holes out of the cardboard itself. I think that makes a lot more sense. It's a little unstable, like if you cut the piece of cardboard out and then it loses a little bit of its stability. So there is a stick right here in between, just propping the top and bottom of the cardboard together so that it is a little more stable and doesn't collapse in on itself on that side. So once I had this, I covered it. I tried first just doing this yarn, but it didn't cover it enough. You could still see the cardboard and the tape underneath it, and that obviously doesn't look all that nice, and it doesn't look like a ball of yarn. So I put another color of pink underneath. There's more coverage once I did that, and then I put this bright color, the final color of pink, over it. I could also have used a ball of yarn that I had a lot more of, or a smaller pumpkin, but I think it turned out really well. I like the size. I wanted to do this in such a way where I didn't waste the yarn. I had a few other ideas of where I could like make a cardboard frame and then just glue a layer of yarn to it and cut out, and then actually, like when I was carving the pumpkin, I could actually cut out the cardboard and it could look good that way. But then obviously I would have used up all of that yarn and I wouldn't have been able to use it again for anything. So I wanted to like try and make it actually a ball of yarn so that I could use the yarn again if I wanted to. Although now I really like this guy and I'm not gonna use that yarn for anything anytime soon. And I did actually, so once you have your frame, then you've got to cover it with yarn. It's the same sort of thing. I mean, this is done by machine, but you just have to go around and cover it in such a way that there's going to be still a hole at the top, but you also cover everything. Yeah, maybe not. The other thing I think that I was trying to do, I think the thicker, a little bit thicker yarn worked better. Like some of this yarn that even like this I think is a little too fine. I think it just helps the coverage be better. I think you'll have to use more yarn if it's thinner to get the same amount of coverage. So I just went around and wrapped it. It's a little tricky to get it to stay. After you get the first layer, it's a lot easier because at first you gotta get it to have traction on the cardboard and stay where you put it. If you just keep going around continuously, then you can keep building up the layer as you go, and it ends up being pretty strong in coverage. You're just gonna have to use a lot of yarn. After the first couple layers, it'll be easier and it'll start to come together a lot more. So it starts looking a bit like that, where you've just got the cross and then just kind of crossing over itself again and again. Usually when you wrap a ball of yarn, you don't want it to be too tight because you don't want it to stretch out, but I was finding with this one it worked really well, and the final one, it was really tight, and so it feels very, the cardboard tube itself doesn't feel very sturdy, and it wobbles and moves around a lot, but this one feels really stable and solid. And then for the stem, I just, I cut the right pieces of cardboard and painted them green so that it would look vaguely stem-like. Just wedge in between the layers that came about as I wrapped it, so then it sits in there pretty solidly. For the eye hole, I mean, I did make, this was the only thing that I glued down. I just used a little piece of yarn. I just made the one little fake eye hole that I could pull out when I was carving it. I couldn't make a smile because of the way that I wrapped it, where all the pieces were vertical, so having a I couldn't have done that without cutting the yarn, and I didn't want to do that. So I just did the nose and the eyes. So for that, I used a small piece of yarn to tie the yarn at the edge of the eye hole off to the side, on either side, so that it would just leave that gap in the middle where the light could shine through. And I wanted to make it underneath just a couple of layers of that vertical yarn so you couldn't see the cross piece, just to have the top layer on the entire ball of yarn just be uniform, and so you couldn't see it. Just tuck it behind like that on either side. And then that wasn't quite far enough apart, so I went ahead and just tied it to some yarn a little farther off to the edge, just to get it to be a big enough hole for what I wanted. Again, just keeping that just underneath enough to hide it. And then a fair amount of adjusting of the yarn just to get it into the shape that I wanted, so just to what I thought looked good. And then starting the process over again, exactly the same for the other eye. I did a fair bit more adjusting once they were both done to get them to look uniform enough. And then the final touch was just a little bit more yarn to tie back away from the nose just enough to get a little shape there. And that was Jackie done.